Have you ever felt like there's something more to life than what you're currently doing?
Do you see the world differently than everyone around you?
Do you ever dream of achieving big things but feel stuck? We're Tiffany and Sid, and we are the Cycle Breakers.
Not long ago, no one believed in us.
The people closest to me said I'd make a great receptionist.
And mine completely abandoned me and left my life.
We started our journey 5 years ago in a basement.
Now, we live our dream life in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. But how did we get here?
We saw a life that was much better than the one we were living.
And broke through the blocks that hold most people back.
Like self-sabotage, crippling self-doubt, and the fear of rejection. But we knew we were made for more, so we bet on ourselves to make the life that we wanted.
And jumped into a life dedicated to breaking old cycles and patterns.
And now we live on 97 acres in the Smoky Mountains. We travel the world speaking on stages, and we help a small army of people break their cycles as well.
We're the Cycle Breakers, and we break through blocks that are holding most people back so we can go live our dream life.
Welcome to the Cycle Breakers Show.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cycle Breakers Show. I'm Sid Clevinger, one of the original Cycle Breakers, here with my beautiful wife,
Tiffany Toombs Clevinger.
And we are the Cycle Breakers. And this show is all about helping people clear the blocks that are holding them back, get over the pain and blocks that have been holding them back their entire life so they can go out there and start creating a life that they want and ultimately creating their dream life that they want to live every single day. Now, in this episode, we're going to be talking specifically about decision making, but not only about decision making when it comes to, obviously, decisions are very important in our journey to being able to make the right decisions to get the things that we want. But we're going to be talking about how a specific block can really stop us from making the right decisions. And that block that we're going to talk about today is going to be stress. I think a lot of people, specifically high-level entrepreneurs, get stressed out. It becomes a very easy thing that a lot of people can, basically receive with all the different curveballs that, entrepreneurs and high-level people are getting thrown at them each and every day. And in this episode, we're really going to talk about walking through how we can not only get over stress, not only be able to handle the stress block, but also turn that into making the right decisions along our journey so that we can get to where we want faster, no matter what it is, where we want is, whether it's more time, whether it's more money, whether it's specifically just walking into a life of less stressed out, right? What are the decisions that we need to make to do that? But specifically, how do we use getting over this stress block to make those better decisions? And in this episode, we're going to be talking about how to do that. So, Tiffany, when it comes to stress for your life and when it comes to, being able to get rid of the stress block and specifically be able to make right decisions, maybe talk to a little bit of people around what stress is, what it can lead to, and how a lot of things kind of lead into stress and what it really does to the body and the brain.
Yeah, so I think at like the most fundamental level, people know what stress is because they experience it, but what they don't know is the impact that it has on the body and the brain, and then how that filters into us thinking that we're making the best decisions, or us thinking that we have less choice or less options available to us. So in the work that we do, our goal is to help people see the options and the choices and freedoms that have always been there, but that they've closed their mind off to. So when we are stressed out, or when our stress cycle has been activated, right? And stressors can be in all sorts of forms. And, that might be a whole episode in its own, talking about the different stressors. But, people think of like money and relationships and bills and the economy and blah, 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 blah. But also things like how much time you spend on your tech is stressful to your body, the foods that you eat, things like that. So whenever there's a stressor, what happens is it activates our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight, flight, freeze, and fawn nervous system. And we move through this like an inclining scale, right? So we first start out in fight mode. And so when we are in that fight mode, the stressor has just come up. We're feeling that agitation start to rise inside. And we are going to, from this place, we are going to perceive people as being more confrontational, more threatening, more aggressive than maybe what they actually are. And then that obviously is going to impact how we respond to things. So for example, I think it was like last week, I was, sitting, working with Chad. He was playing, and all of a sudden, like that, decided that he wanted to enter his terrible twos phase. And so he's whining
He's
and
2 weeks
screaming.
early. He's
I
2 weeks
know.
early, by the way.
I know. I thought I had 2 more weeks before we entered terrible twos. But he's like throwing toys at me, and he's just entered this hitting phase where he loves to hit. All of a sudden, I've got
He's
a
left
partial.
bruises on your leg. I freak out that people are going to think that I beat you.
I mean, I got a partial black eye right now.
Yeah.
From
I got
him.
hit at church yesterday. I was telling you, I got hit like with one of those bells that they give the kids. And he literally just and just smacked me right in the forehead. And I thought I was gonna have to come home, and you're gonna be like, I can't let you two out of the house without me.
So you were in the office doing some work, which is cool. I think you were doing a podcast interview or something. So I'm watching Chad. I'm attempting to get some work done, and he's just like stressing me out, right? I was just feeling super overstimulated, overwhelmed in that moment. I was doing my best to use my breathing techniques and my nervous system reset tools. And, you sent me a message, or you called out or something, and you said, hey, the next time you send me this thing, can you send it in this way? And you like said it super nice. Like, hey, the next time you send me this thing, can you just send it to me in a different
Everything's
format?
super nice, Tiff. Come on.
That's debatable. But in this one occasion, you were just like, hey, this is a better way for me to receive this information so that I can keep track of it all. But what I heard, because I was in this state of overwhelm and I was in my fight mode, what I heard was, you're such an idiot. Why would you send it to me this way? You dumb, like send it to me this other way. That would make you better. And that's how I took it. So then my reaction was like, well, I didn't know you wanted it that way. And you're like, I know, I'm just telling you. And I was like, okay. And then because I have the tools that we have, luckily, I could see like, oh, I totally misread that situation. Need to come back to my breath right now. So that's what happens in the fight mode, right? Is that we perceive things as being more aggressive, more confrontational, more threatening than what they actually are. Now, if the stressor doesn't go away and it continues to build, we then move into flight mode, where now we just want to run away. We want to like get out of there. And that when I'm very overwhelmed, I'm like, I got to take a walk, right? And I'll just like leave. In the beginning of our relationship, you didn't take that so well because you had your own traumas and triggers over people leaving you. And so you always thought I was leaving, but I was like, I just need to go cool down and like get rid of some of this energy. Right. Mm-hmm. But that would be like the flight mode. Now, some people will physically flee where I would like need to leave the situation. That was also a mechanism for me to get myself back under control, regulate myself. But there was, there are people who will mentally and emotionally flee. So they like just mentally check out. So they're in a conversation with you, but they're not really there, right? Like they're not listening. They're off in la la land. They've just left their body in some way. If the agitation
dreamers.
Potentially, yeah. Or, society calls it ADHD.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other conversation. So
many conversations.
As the agitation continues to rise, it gets to a point where it overwhelms the system and we go into either freeze mode or fawn mode. These are both you watch Animal Planet or like any of the National Geographics?
Oh my gosh, those are addictive. I had to like turn off if I turn one of those on, I will literally like watch it for hours on end because it's so interesting. So I had to learn, especially because we don't watch a lot of TV, just kind of how to cut it out of my life. But it was just sort of like, like I watch those and I might have a secret obsession with some of those, not only channels, but not only shows, but channels in general.
Yeah. So you like watch Animal Planet, you watch National Geographic, you see the lion attack the gazelle and the gazelle just go like limp and all of a sudden is playing dead, right? That is the animal equivalent of what we do, freeze or fawn. So in freeze, and neuroscientists out of Stanford University actually discovered that we have what's called a quitting circuit, that when our system becomes so overwhelmed, it turns off our ability to use our limbs. Like we can't do anything, right? I hear this a lot from people who have had some sort of like sexual trauma. They've been sexually abused, molested, raped. They're like, well, I didn't fight back. So maybe I wanted it. And they guilt and shame themselves for that. But it's not that. It's not that you wanted it. It's that your system became so overwhelmed that it shut down. You played dead in that situation because that was the best way for you to survive that situation. Because survival is like our number one thing, right? Like we will always default back to what do I have to do to survive? So freeze, we like physically can't move, or there's a mental emotional freeze, which we call a functional freeze. And this is probably more common in society. It's a way that a lot of people procrastinate. One of the most common ways in today's world that people enter the functional freeze, scrolling social media. So in their head, they'll be like, oh, I know I need to get up and go to bed. I know I need to get up and go make dinner, but they just can't stop the scroll, right? And the next thing they know, it's like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and they haven't stopped scrolling Facebook or TikTok.
I've
That's the
noticed, like,
function.
I know for me, like that usually happens in the morning or at night. So in the morning, it usually comes from, I was up until, and then they work together, which is crazy, right? So like I'll stay up. I was talking to you about this actually earlier today, where it's literally like I'll sit down and it's like I know I need to go to bed, or I know I need to read and then go to bed. Like, this is the time that I stop working. There's always going to be work to do. There's always going to be stuff that needs to get done. So this is the time that I stop working. This is the time that I start doing self-care, which for me is reading and really winding myself down, because if I stay amped up at night, it becomes really difficult for me to fall asleep. And I will have a challenge for me to fall asleep, right? But it's not that that's a limiting belief for me. It's like that's how I know that my body works. So if I literally am able to start shutting down, which I'm not perfect at, nobody is, but I've gotten a lot better at, to where it's kind of like at this time of night, I need to start shutting down. So that means computer needs to go away. My mind needs to start winding down. And usually the way I get my mind to wind down is one, I like to read. So like, and it's usually not reading around business. Like I get it. I get it. I used to love reading business books, but that keeps my mind spinning. What I actually have gotten into really liking to read a lot about is usually around old like wisdom stuff. So like I've read a lot of stuff around Ram Dass. I've read a lot of stuff. I've read Yogananda stuff, but then also reading a lot of Native American stuff, because a lot of that old wisdom kind of helps install a lot of the anchors or a lot of the lessons that I actually learn, to where business makes a lot more sense. But at the end of the day, if I stay up late at night, it then makes it a lot more difficult, a lot more of a challenge to get up the next morning, right? Then it can easily become this perpetual cycle. And
Yeah.
then what I found is I go into like an absolute freeze mode at night, because I'll sit there and say it's 9 o'clock and I'm like, I need to start getting ready for bed. And then what happens is I'll have my computer up and I'll say, okay, I can just get this one thing done in 5 minutes. And before I know it, I'm trying to get 4 or 5 things done. And it's been 2 hours and it's 11 o'clock. I've lost my reading time. I'm now in this massive, like, my mind is extremely wired and extremely spinning, because I got all this stuff coming through. And then when I go and I go upstairs and come to bed, which you're already usually asleep, and a lot of times Chad's already moved over to the bed, and I go and I do that, my mind isn't ready to go to sleep yet. It's still running in circles. So then I lay in bed and I don't actually fall asleep at the time that I wanted. And I might get up there at 11, but I don't fall asleep until 12:30 or 1. And then here we are again. I got to get up at 7 o'clock and I don't have the sleep that I need. And it literally it can easily become into this loop and into this cycle if you're not careful. So I think it's very important, especially when it comes to sleeping, that we need to look at like, how do we turn, like, this is why I love camping so much, because I don't know if anybody is listening to this has ever went camping. When I go camping, you're forced to not have your phone, and you're forced to not have TV, and you're forced to just be around nature. And we just got back from camping. And I don't know about you, Tiff, but I know it's so easy for me to wake up at like 6 a.m. when I'm camping. And no, it's not because we hear strange noises at night or people coming into the campground at 4 a.m. For whatever reason, like it's like the sun comes up, I come up. The sun goes down, I go down. I mean, I remember when we were camping last week, I was laying in the hammock and you were putting Chad to bed, and it was only like 9 or 9:30, but I was forced to not have my phone. I was forced to not have a TV to turn on. I was forced to not have all of these things going through my head of what I needed to get done. I just had a book and I just filled my belly with some of the best hot dogs that we've ever had. And they were all beef, by the way. Okay. Tiffany's on the carnivore diet, so it had to be all beef. And I literally had just got done doing that. And I'm laying in this hammock at 9 o'clock. And I'm literally reading my book and I'm finishing up a book. And I just remember being like, whoa, I'm dead tired. Like I could go to sleep right now. But then I look at my watch and I'm like, it's only 9:08.
Mhm.
This is weird. I normally don't go to, I normally am, starting to wind down at this time, but I was dead tired. And no, it wasn't because I was chasing Chad. Well, he did run into the picnic table once, but it wasn't because I was chasing Chad around the campground, although that's very tiring at, 22 months old or 23 months old. It was literally because my body had almost felt like it had naturally fallen back into the kind of going along with, I don't know if it's a natural rhythm, you can define this, but it's almost kind of like, my body's kind of started going along with nature. And I think a lot of times when we're stuck inside and when we're, it's easy to turn a light on, it's easy to turn the TV on, it's easy to be stimulated with sounds or with light, or smell or whatever, it becomes really easy for us to get out of that rhythm, which can then turn into a loop that can actually hurt us. And that's been a huge block of mine that's really kind of led to many other things, even limiting beliefs that I've had, simply because I knew that, like I would only get 6 hours of sleep when I knew I needed to get 8.
Yeah. So being in nature definitely resets our rhythms for sure. The thing about scrolling or like watching TV or going into those functional freeze, especially at night, is we do it because the system is overwhelmed, right? Our system is like, I'm exhausted. I've done so much. Like, it's too much. And
Mhm.
so we think that we're resting because it's mindless TV or it's mindless scrolling. But what we don't realize is that it's still the TV, TikToks, Instagram, whatever it is that you scroll, it's still stimulating our nervous system. So we're overstimulated already, and we're looking for relief from that. And then we do something that continues to stimulate the nervous system but we've tricked ourselves into thinking that it's not. And then we just stay in this cycle. So
Mhm.
that's the freeze side. And then the other side is the fawn side, where that might look like, you know, being the people pleaser or being the chameleon. So not being your authentic self, but being whoever you think you need to be in a situation to be liked and accepted by people so that you're safe. And
Mhm.
so in all of these places, like in fight mode, we're going to make decisions based on believing that we're being attacked. So now we become defensive. We feel like we have to justify our actions, our decisions, our behaviors. We have to defend ourselves. In flight mode, we feel rushed. We don't have time to consider all the options. We don't have time to connect with our intuition. We just feel like we have to rush. So then we make bad decisions. And in flight, in flight, we can't make decisions. That's where we get the indecisiveness. We're like so paralyzed we can't make the decision. And then in fawn, you either make the decision based on what you think other people want from you, so still that people pleasing, or you get caught in paralysis because you're like, I don't know what will make people happy, or I can't make a decision right now that's going to make everybody happy, so I'm just not going to make a decision. And so the way that we
You
get out of
notice
this.
too, do you notice, and I don't know if you might have mentioned this in the past in some other episodes, or, maybe you mentioned it earlier today, that always seems to happen in order for me. So like when if I allow myself, if I get quote unquote, let's call it stimulated, because I feel like before stress even comes along, like stimulation happens at some point. So, even as what I would consider, high level entrepreneurs, people, we've done this for a very long time and we're pretty successful at it, right? When we look at like, even when we know the tools that, it's real easy to get stimulated, and usually that stimulation is what leads to the stress. But have you ever noticed that like usually the first thing that it's almost kind of like it's this like downward spiral, like you go into fight first, and then you go into flight. So like for me,
Yeah,
you
so it's actually a spectrum. You do move through, like you
yeah.
hit fight first, then you hit flight, then you hit freeze and fawn.
Yeah, so if you remember, like, what was it, a couple of months ago? Um, some of you that know, have listened to other episodes of the show, that, my family is very much cut out of my life and our son's life. And, I don't need to go into why because we talked about it in other episodes. But, my dad reached out to me, what was it, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, or something like that. And, like, we were going, don't need to get into the grimy details, but ultimately, like that entire day was like what you're talking about. Like I went through fight mode, flight mode, freeze mode, and then fawn mode. And it's looking back at it, like even when I was caught in the middle of it and I was doing my best to get out of it in the moment, it was almost kind of like I was trapped in it. And even I even had you, and at the end of the time, I think like the deeper that I got into the fight, flight, freezer mode, it was like the harder it was for me to get out of it. So it was almost kind of like I was getting deeper and deeper and deeper into a black hole, which I honestly believe why it's so important. Now, granted, I was able to get out of it, but when I got out of it, it was almost like I was shaking off all this black soot that I had built up in the body. Like it was really weird sensation. Like, like even like now, like when I was like looking at it, and like I got really, really amped up. And then when I got amped up, my heart rate just went through the roof. Like, so I wear like, I wear a Garmin watch. And like, I remember just looking down and like, honestly, my heart rate hovers in the low 70s when it's resting, mid 60s, low 70s. And then throughout the day, it usually hovers in the 80s. I looked down and my heart rate was in the mid 120s. And I
Yeah.
didn't even
So
know why. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I know I'm mad. I know I'm upset, but I don't feel like my heart's racing. But I look down and my heart's like right now it's at 70 on the number. And I'm talking fast and I'm doing all this stuff. But then I looked down and it was like a 125. And I was like, what's going on? But then you would touch me and you're like, you're shaking. And I'm like, I don't know why. But it was almost kind of like it was just I'd allowed myself in that moment to start entering into that phase, which once I entered into it, became a lot more difficult to get out of it.
yeah, so a lot of people, so that shaking is actually a healthy response. So what happens is as we get agitated, the energy builds within our nervous system. Same thing. You watch National Geographic, you watch Animal Planet, the gazelle plays dead, the lion decides he no longer wants that gazelle, the meat must be bad, whatever, walks away from it. When the gazelle feels safe, you'll notice the gazelle will get up and shake because it's releasing that energy from the nervous system, right? So we've just had all of this adrenaline, cortisol dumped into our system to protect us. And our nervous system like doesn't activate the sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. It doesn't activate that just for actual threats, perceived threats as well. So, you're having this argument on text message. That's a perceived threat. So you've got all of this agitation building up and your body needs to release it. Now, because it's not socially acceptable to just start like shaking and convulsing to get rid of that energy like the animals do, most people suppress it. And this is what dysregulates the nervous system. It creates indents on the nervous system where now we're holding more energy in the nervous system. So the next stressor that comes, we don't even need the same level of intensity of the threat or the stress to kick us all the way back into freeze, for example. So this is where people will like live their life in freeze. And there's a lot of research and evidence to suggest that people who are suffering from depression are in a freeze mode in their nervous system. And we have to start releasing that energy. So the first place to do that, to start making better decisions in the moment when you know that you're triggered and activated, and B, to start releasing this energy from your nervous system so that you can break free from fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, is we have to slow down time. And the best way to do that is by taking a deep breath, taking a nice deep breath, because when the bear is chasing you, you are going to be breathing sharp and shallow in your chest, not from your belly, not diaphragm breaths, because you're running away from the bear, you're preparing to fight.
And
right?
so everybody, like, even though I was doing that, like I'm telling you from someone who like Tiffany will tell you, like, I would get so stressed out and I'd be like, this is normal. This is normal. This is how I normally feel. I'm not stressed out. But then I would come out of it like an hour or two later, and it would almost feel like I just wrestled with my body with a bear. And I felt like I was just like so sore, physically sore and tired and mentally exhausted. And like I think it's very important to know, even though in the moment, especially in the moment, if you're in a fight or flight mode, you might not always like quote unquote feel it happening, but it is happening. And I think like that's part of the trap is you're kind of like, no, I'm fine. And you'll refuse to take a step back and take a deep breath. Whereas in the moment, I think it's very important that you almost need to just set up a routine, because now it's almost like a routine, right? Like Tiffany, notices like And she talked about earlier in this episode, she goes for a walk. And that's a big thing that I'll do now too. I think it's almost kind of like you have to set up this routine, and you have to, like, I hate to say the word force, but you almost need to, like, do it regardless if you feel like you're in that state or not.
Yeah. I mean, you don't feel the pain in the moment because you've got so much adrenaline rushing through you. That's part of what adrenaline does. Because if you're trying to run away from the bear and you're feeling all of this pain, right? Or you're wrestling the bear and you're feeling all of this pain, that's not going to help you win the fight and survive. So it's like we dull our pain, our pain sensory nerves out so that we can get through the situation, but then it hits us later. So we've got to come back to our breath first. That's going to create this gap in time where we feel like, okay, now I've got some space from the issue, emotionally, physically, spiritually, energetically, whatever. I've got some space from whatever the stressor is. And now I can make the best decision based on what's most in alignment with my goals. So
And I was just gonna say real quick on the breath, and you can probably explain this a little bit easier. When you say take a deep breath, I know a lot of people are like, okay, I'll take a deep breath. Okay, done. I think there is a specific way that you can do it. And it was you that told me this. I think it's very, very important that people remember when you take a deep breath. And Tiffany, just correct me if I'm wrong on this, but you want to obviously breathe in as deep as you can, but you want your exhale to be longer than your inhale.
Yeah, you do want your exhale to be longer than your inhale. Ideally, your first deep breath is probably going to suck because you're
Mine
still
did,
in
everybody. Don't worry. It's something I had to learn too. Tiffany used to laugh at me.
But even in the moment, it's probably going to suck, right? And so the goal really is to take a deeper breath with each subsequent breath and allow your breathing to slow down. So this is something that we have put together, and we have specific exercises to help people with in the 7-day nervous system reset, which is absolutely free, because we know the impact of stress on decision-making, on health, on relationships, on every area of your life. There's literally not a cell in your body that's not negatively impacted by being in chronic stress. And there is not an area of your life that is not negatively impacted by you being in chronic stress. So the 7-day nervous system reset is the fastest way to gain these tools to help you start to reset your system and pull you fully out of the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn mode. So all you have to do to get that is go to resetmysystem.com/reset. We'll also link it up in the show notes for you. But if you go there, it's absolutely free. You can get started doing this work, recalibrating your nervous system today.
And what that recalibrating your nervous system is going to help you do is to have the tools necessary to be able to get out of this stress. And at the end of the day, I think it's also important to note that stress usually happens through another block in front of it. So whether it's self-sabotage, self-doubt, or whatever, whether it's a toxic relationship, whether it's, like a lot of the stress that's been around me has been through toxic relationships in my family recently, right? So I think to remember that stress usually doesn't come by itself as much as it comes with something else in front of it, at least from what I've seen. So
stress is just how we feel, right? It's the aftermath of a specific thing that's happening and how we perceive that thing.
So just have people remember that, if you're feeling stressed out or you're feeling overwhelmed or whatever that might be, there's something usually in front of that that's causing that stress. And, really figuring out, like, clearing the block that's in front of it usually can help alleviate or basically take away, that stress, if you're able to not only figure out what's in front of it causing the stress, but you're able to start clearing that block as well, which is also what the 7-day nervous system reset can really help you do, or start doing at least.
Yeah. So go get the 7-day nervous system reset. It's going to give you all the tools that you need to start regulating your nervous system so you can make better decisions across the board in every area of your life. That is it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be back in a future episode with even more gold and magic, and we have some incredible interviews coming up as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Cycle Breakers, where this channel is all about helping people clear out the blocks that are holding them back. We have a free gift for you, and that free gift is called our 7-day nervous system reset. The 7-day nervous system reset is where we help you calibrate your nervous system so you can go out there and control your emotions and start to take more control of your life, helping clear the blocks that are holding you back so you can start stepping into that dream life. It's absolutely free, and you can grab it down here in the description. And remember, our friends, let's dare to heal.